Congressman Steve Stockman is on the telephone. Congressman Stockman represents the 36th Congressional District of Texas. He's one of the most outspoken defenders of constitutional government. Congressman Stockman, welcome to True News.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Congressman, is anybody in charge of the response to Ebola?
You wonder if anybody's in charge of ISIS or Ebola. We do have a record number. As was announced, the White House now has done 200 games of golf. So I think what we need to do is get ISIS and the Ebola chief to learn to play golf and get out there and talk to the president, because apparently he doesn't care about a Marine in Mexico that's being held, and I might add beaten and treated like a POW. He doesn't care apparently about Ebola. Doesn't seem to care about his policies that are failing in the Middle East. This is a case in which the media, once again, is silenced to anything he does and panders to him. If this was a Republican president, it would be a totally different visceral reaction from the press.
Congressman, I have a very cynical position regarding Mr. Obama. I think he's delighted with the results of his policies. I honestly do. I sincerely do. I believe this man is the number one national security threat to the United States.
Well, if you listen to his campaign, which a lot of the people don't like to listen to. In fact, ironically, I was on a plane and they showed the movie from 2008 that caused the court case. They actually showed the movie and they made predictions and comments about his agenda. And of course, everybody ignored it. But one of the things he talked about was defanging the United States. In other words, stripping the United States of its military capabilities. And we are now in the process of doing that. In fact, you probably read we're actually chopping up planes that are $500 million worth of planes that we could be giving to our allies, either the Kurds or in Ukraine or other places. Instead, we chopped them up and destroyed them. I apologize. I got a bit of a cold.
Well, we don't want you to be quarantined.
I don't know. It's just shocking how much there's lack of concern at the top level. It's really alarming, actually.
It is, because you can't rationalize this kind of behavior. The country's never been in this condition that is so life-threatening to us as a people. And the guy at the top seems like he's just out to lunch. Like, he doesn't care.
Yeah, you think about this. If you had a ship and you're in a storm and the captain's down there just having a dinner and a good old time, the rest of the people on the boat would be alarmed. You know, what's our captain doing? Why is he so not caring about the passengers of this boat or the ship? And that's what we have in President Obama. And we can't get the reason there's not alarm is because a lot of the people in the media have people working in the administration. And, former press secretary worked, for various news organizations. And you have that all through out the press. You have people that were working with Democrat congressmen and senators. So they have an agenda, despite their claims they don't.
You mentioned, the analogy of a ship with in a terrible storm and the captain, having a great old time playing poker. Those kind of conditions is what produces a mutiny, where the crew says, if we don't take control of the situation, we're all going to die.
Yeah, well, the problem is we have a press that's not doing its job. They should be sending out the alarms, and even the press had their privacy invaded, where the Obama officials are taking their phone records, and you would think that would be one thing that would push them over the top, and that the Justice Department should investigate, but they didn't. Actually, the Justice Department did it, but it's pretty alarming in how they're using the Justice Department almost as a third world punishing mechanism. But the press seems not to be alarmed at any of that stuff that's going on.
Congressman, are we in a soft dictatorship?
I think that there's a lot of people that would argue that, and I tend to lean towards that. I see the way that our government's used to promote a a specific agenda at the expense of rule and law. You usually have, I think, more interaction by the House and the Senate, and yet we have executive orders. We have things that are really undermining our nation. You have a unilateral disarmament of the DoD, the Defense Department, and you can see this process going on. And every day we have it incrementally losing our rights, and those that speak up against this administration are punished, whether it's a press person or a politician. They find ways to take retribution out on those people.
Or a movie producer like Dr. DeSouza.
Yeah, and despite all the machinations of the left saying, "Oh, this is normal," it's not. There's a lot of others that have done worse. I would argue that there should be an investigation of the gun running down to Mexico. There should be an investigation of the IRS. This shouldn't have to be done by the House. It should be done by the Justice Department. Clear laws were broken, but none of that is investigated and doesn't rise to the level of suspicion on this administration.
Have you ever considered the possibility that Mr. Obama was actually deliberately arming dangerous criminal gangs in Mexico for a future project?
I can't speak to that. I don't know, but I do know that it was designed to, much as others have said, to make it look like that the American gun shops down there were deliberately running guns to the Mexico. A lot of the ones that were caught up in it had one individual not recorded the conversations and the documentation of the ATF, he would have been in jail. I think they were trying to make a scenario, in my opinion, that would argue for more gun control, which, is one of his agenda, which I might add every authoritarian government advocates taking away individuals' rights to own defensive weapons.
Congressman, Texas is being overrun with the illegal immigrants coming over the border. This past year, Washington has dropped all pretenses that it's even trying to enforce border security. And then now Texas has the Ebola outbreak. I mean, you guys are getting hit pretty hard this year.
Well, it's not just that. The administration has any funding to Texas. We had a plant down here that made military equipment. He moved it out of Texas. He cut the funding for NASA. He's done everything possible, put restrictions on our industries that no other state has. He does not like Texans for obvious reasons because we're more independent. And even our governor, which took a rational line and vetoed money in order to get them to act upon a prosecutor who, by the way, drank about 25 gallons of liquor according to the receipts. They end up charging him for doing his job. This is an authoritarian government, really like a third world banana republic, the way they're operating. And here in Texas, we're pretty upset with the federal government constantly interfering.
On the national level, why has the Republican Party been so weak and impotent in its response to this kind of tyranny?
I think, one of the things I can just tell you, for instance, on immigration, you have Barry Fletcher, who's the former press secretary for Bush, who's never won an election, who has not a clue about campaigns. He issued the report, which Rice Previous uses for articulating the reasons to have illegal immigrants become citizens, which is ironic. It's like giving us the rope to put around our neck. You have people that have no idea what they're doing advising Republican leadership. The fact is we did a study in which we found California, after Reagan granted amnesty, California went directly into the Democrat hands, and that's what will happen to Texas if the Bushes and those folks that are pushing this illegal immigrants as a solution and a panacea to everything. We will lose or never win another presidency in the history of the United States. I just don't think it'll happen. they're not. I was on the border. They're not coming across the border, and they're not declaring themselves to be libertarian or conservatives. To the contrary, they immediately sign up for benefits, which inclines them to lean to those that support those benefits.
The unprecedented number of undocumented and unaccompanied children that came over the border this year, was that a genuine humanitarian crisis, or was that an orchestrated political operation?
I think it's orchestrated. I'll tell you why. I was down on the border several times, and I didn't go through the Obama administration's press secretary or any of those people. The second time I was down there, the third time I was down there, they wanted us to do that. We tried to work with the administration to go through proper channels. Of course, we got even less information. But one of the times we went down there unaccompanied as a congressman, they always want to accompany us, not the illegal immigrants, which is kind of ironic. We went down there and we actually talked with some of the illegal immigrants coming across the border. And they came across repeatedly directly, because Obama said, if you get over here, we're going to take care of you. That was the message repeatedly heard. And you can even to this day go down there and ask them. Anybody can go down there and ask them, why are you coming here? And they tell you. Obama said there was going to be amnesty. We're coming here to get, to become citizens and to get the benefits. There's no doubt what his speeches and so forth penetrated down there and made a big difference. And what people don't realize, they travel 1,000 miles from Guatemala. It's about 1,000 miles. And on the way up, the women often are raped, beaten, or kidnapped, or murdered. So if you're truly a compassionate person, which I think most of us are, we wouldn't want to encourage that travel or journey. Yet what we have on the left is they're encouraging that, and which increases the rape and the killing. And no one wants to talk about that. I had CNN with me one time. I repeatedly tried to bring it up, and she cut me off. They didn't want to talk about that part. That part, the dirty aspect of the people that are being tortured, raped, and kidnapped, murdered, all that, there shouldn't be any discussion of that. In fact, they even have what are called rape trees, in which the clothing of the women is hung on a tree. And many of the parents give their kids birth control pills because they know they're going to be raped. It's horrendous and very, very bad, and yet that's one of the things that no one wants to talk about.
But is it realistic to believe that small children, 4 or 5, 6 years old, are walking from Guatemala unaccompanied all the way to Texas?
No, I think that's a bit of a myth. In fact, the ones we asked, they have in their hands a piece of paper that the smugglers give them what to say, and you'll be surprised. It's much more organized than it's done mainly through the drug cartels and stuff. And they will sit there with a piece of paper and repeat, we're here unaccompanied. But for instance, this one little girl we interviewed, she said, well, actually, I'm the younger sister to this person over here, and my mother sent me with this person. So for the purpose of discussion of coming across the border and meeting American authorities, they deliberately have a story which they know fits within the Obama administration's guidelines to stay here. And they use it to a very, very their ability. Now, here's one thing that they don't discuss. When we were down there, we saw lots of people with illnesses, and they discussed that. But anytime we tried to get to the area where they actually have a holding area for the people with all these diseases and stuff, many times these kids are sent out sick. And some argue that this newest outbreak across the country may be tied to the young kids that are being shipped off without adequate medical attention. There's a second point is that and I've asked this repeatedly, and I got the same answer, and no one follows up on it. I say, do you do background checks for the people calling up here that want to sponsor a child? The answer repeatedly is no, we don't have enough resources to do that. So if you're a pedophile and you want to get a young kid, a young girl, a young boy, or whatever, you can call up and say, I'm willing to sponsor a kid, and you too can have a kid of your own, and we are not doing the background checks we should be doing.
Regarding the virus, this EVD68 that's attacking, I guess so far close to 800, 1,000 children in the United States started this summer. According to investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson, she said that there are significant numbers of illegal minors in Kansas City and Chicago, the two cities where the EVD68 virus first broke out. Now, she didn't have proof that they transmitted the virus, but there is the smoke is there. It's like, okay, we have large concentrations of undocumented children brought in by the Obama administration, dropped off in Kansas City and Chicago, and simultaneously, we have an outbreak of a mysterious respiratory disease.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's what I was pointing out. I think if it was a responsible government that we had in power, you would have someone investigating that and documenting it. But because they don't want to know the answers to some of these really tough questions, they intentionally don't ask them. But I think Cheryl, which, by the way, is not a right-wing blogger, she has a long history of mainstream media. And part why she's no longer with them is because she was speaking the truth. And I think she has a valid argument, and there should be follow-up on that. And because I believe there is a linkage, and I'd like to see further investigation to it. But if there is, we're exposing our nation in the name of compassion for countries, which, by the way, many cities in the United States, including Chicago, have a higher death rate than Guatemala, but that's another issue. I guess we should be sending our kids from Chicago down to Guatemala to be safer. But we need to follow up on that. That's a serious allegation, and it needs to be investigated. It's quite alarming that we don't investigate what could be potentially a very serious problem for the United States. What
about the terrorists coming over the border? I mean, this was, I said months, last summer when this invasions, picked up with the undocumented children, I said, folks, you know where this is going. By fall or the end of this year, we're going to be talking about terrorists that have come into the United States, and then there's going to be some intelligence agency report saying we never connected the dots. We never saw this happening.
Yeah, this is one of those things where you don't ask questions because you don't want to know the answers. We have several congressmen who are saying, the conservatives are being alarmist. But it's not really alarmist. It's kind of logical. These, we called, I think Obama called the ISIS Junior League, and that they couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. This kind of thing is you don't ask questions ahead of time, and you end up regretting it. This is one of the clear issues. They as you know, there was posted pictures of the White House, I think pictures in Chicago and other places, where the individuals were posting on jihadist web pages indicating that they're targeting. They even held up a little piece of paper written in Arabic saying, we are from ISIS, we're here. But that doesn't raise any alarms, which to me is alarming. I don't know what level does it take for the nation to get alarmed. I remember after the Boston bombings, we had one of the Justice Department people come in and talk to us. And I asked them, I said, these guys were subscribers to a jihadi magazine. I said, don't you think that if they subscribe to jihadi magazine, they might be jihadis? Or, like if you're subscribing to a ski magazine, you may be a skier, or a bird watching magazine. You may be a bird watcher. And they said that did not rise to the level of investigation just because they subscribed to that magazine, which I think is quite absurd.
What did you think of Barry Benghazi sending a Homeland Security official to Oklahoma City to encourage the Islamic mosque that produced the man who beheaded the grandmother in Oklahoma City?
Well, again, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we're calling it workplace violence.
Right.
Again.
Mm-hmm.
And if the interview by some of the administration officials, their twisted rationale behind this, and as you know, they removed a lot of things from our government paper. We're not allowed to use, I guess, jihadis anymore. In fact, one paper said from the Obama administration, I believe, said that jihad was a noble thing. I think that the behavior in way we treat our soldiers and those that have fallen victim to this fascist ideology and murder is beyond the pale. We have no sympathy, apparently, for the victims of this ideology, and yet we try to rationalize and blame everybody else for it and not hold those that do it accountable. It's just mind-boggling.
What's happening to this country is mind-boggling. I mean, 2014, we have our first beheading of an American citizen on American soil. Hardly anything was said about it. Now we have Ebola, the deadliest virus on the planet. And, if you think about two plagues coming together simultaneously, Islamic terrorism and Ebola. I mean, this is a nightmare scenario, and nobody has confidence in the man in the White House that he would do anything to protect the American people. In fact, a lot of us are afraid of him.
I'd agree with you on that. And there's another element here, which we're saying, well, we don't know if we have terrorists here. Do you remember there was a substation which with long-range guns?
San Jose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of brushed under the rug. That clearly is someone testing the system and testing what we do in response. That's never been, we never found out who did that or why.
Has anybody in Congress seriously pursued the truth about that incident?
I brought it up, but there's 435 members, and a lot of them, the short answer is I'm not aware of it, mm-hmm. and that would be a great, I think, investigation that should go forward. But
do you have an estimate of the 435 members of Congress? What would you estimate? How many of them actually know that incident took place?
This is a guess. Sure. I'm guessing maybe 30, 20, 30.
Less than 10%?
I know. I can tell you this, and I won't tell who I was with, but I was overseas at an event, function with other people from the government, and I was astounded. It was dealing with terrorism, and I was astounded at the lack of knowledge of members. Now, remember, it really is a reflection of the United States, so you could probably go out, your listeners could go out and do a test thing, go to your churches even, and ask them how many in the church know about it. It's not well known, and what's odd is that this should have been a huge story. That's to try to hit United States power grid in that fashion and to test our capabilities is an act of war, and yet that's not covered. And as you know, we also had incursions in our space. We think from the Chinese, that hasn't been run to ground either. We have major threats. People, you got to understand, the United States, while we love our country, there's many people out there that want to see it gone, and they're working night and day to ensure that happens. And I think if it ever comes to fruition where the United States lost, you're going to see chaos on a scale that you've never seen before in the world.
And we've got Russian nuclear bombers making regular runs towards our border.
Yep. And they're increasing their development while Obama pledged he wants to leave office with 0 nuclear weapons. The Chinese have a neutron bomb. They're the only country in the world that I know has a neutron bomb, which, by the way, I think we developed. It's basically a huge microwave that kills everybody through radiation and leaves the buildings. It's a devastating weapon. They're creating MIRVs, and that's a multiple reentry vehicle, meaning that they can shoot one warhead and hit 9 or 10 targets, depending how well advanced they are, 4 or 5, 2 or 3. And they're going to be putting them on they're building a large number of submarines. And in World War II, Germany had more submarines. We probably would be speaking German.
I was speaking to former Ambassador Cooper the other day on the telephone. He's going to be on the program tomorrow. He was director of the Strategic Defense Initiative under President Reagan and President Bush. And I asked him about Obama's pledge to de-nuke this country, to de-arm us. And Ambassador Cooper said, he said, well, he was aware that Mr. Obama wanted to do that, but he said, I'm positive that the Congress would not let him do that. I'm sure that has never happened. Congressman, do you know? Does anybody know whether Obama has successfully carried out his pledge to disarm the United States?
Well, remember that pledge was made, I think it was in San Francisco, and his commitment was to make sure we didn't have weapons because we were obviously the point of all evil in the world. And I don't know if you saw the clip where I think it was collegereform.org where they interviewed Harvard kids and asked which was more a danger to the world, the United States or ISIS, and many of the kids said the United States. So you definitely have a mentality out there that believe the United States is evil and that we're the problem. And yet I talked to my colleagues about this, and nary a few have any idea what Obama's doing with our nuclear weapons. I would suggest maybe bringing the chairman of the DOD committee on to your show and have a discussion with him. Outside of there, a few people in Congress that know what the president's doing in terms of destruction of our weapons. And I know from several people that are inside the intelligence community, apparently he's accelerating the destruction of our defense in terms of nuclear weapons.
And downsizing the military. I mean, we're taking our manpower level down to unprecedented low level.
Yeah, I think someone argued that it was below World War I's level, which was really super low. And also, too, there's a correlation, despite what our friends on the left say. Anytime the United States gets weak, there's war that breaks out. After World War I, we pretty much destroyed a lot of our capabilities. And then, a few years later, you have World War II, and we had to rebuild it. In World War II, we destroyed our capabilities. In fact, as we speak now, there's billions of dollars of equipment that's being shredded in Afghanistan instead of given to our allies. We keep repeating the same mistakes, but under this president, we accelerate our mistakes to the point that's
Has anybody gotten a halfway intelligent explanation why the Pentagon shredded all these brand new military planes?
No, and I've asked that they be shipped off repeatedly to our allies. And what was met to my request was the acceleration of destruction of it. So I think it's deliberate. They argued it cost too much. But I talked to our allies, for instance, those planes, the only thing they needed was fuel, and the Ukrainians and the Kurds and others wanted them. And they said they're willing to pay for the fuel. So it's nonsense to say, well, it's cheaper to destroy them. In fact, ISIS, I was told, and I haven't validated this, but they have 6 divisions of brand new U.S. military equipment. And it was, we gave it to the Iraqis, and they had it in storage. They weren't even using it. And ISIS came in there and took it. And in fact, we're blowing up our own equipment when we hit targets. It's often U.S. military equipment that we're hitting.
Unbelievable. One last question. After 2001, there was a lot of talk about smallpox, anthrax attacks, bird flu, and the CDC and the World Health Organization put into place protocol for the implementation of emergency measures that nations around the world agreed if we have a pandemic, these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, these things are done immediately. Now, I remember this vividly, Congressman. I remember reporting on this, and I remember reporting on Ebola, 12, 14 years ago when nobody was talking about it. I assumed all these years that when we have a pandemic, these emergency measures were going to be put into place right away. And that's why I'm really puzzled by the ineptness, the slowness of what's taking place. And this isn't the bird flu, this is Ebola. Are you hearing any talk in Washington that at some point in the near future, the U.S. government will simply be compelled to implement certain emergency measures?
Well, yeah. I think, what is it, Executive Order 130, I'm trying to remember, it was 130, 32, 33, where Obama has laid out, it's a great Forbes article, too, you can read about it, but he talks about using emergency powers to take over control of the economy and everything. And then, of course, our friends at Snoop say it's false. But then you read about it, and it turns out to be true. I think, I don't know, their terminology is there's always a crisis in which they want to use to their benefit. I would not be surprised that the reason that you see a lack of response is so it becomes a real crisis, and then things can be used to correct the crisis. I think I know just bizarre there's not enough action up front, and I'm wondering if that's I'm not saying this, but I'm wondering if that's intentional in order to create a greater crisis, to use it as a blunt force to say, well, in order to solve this crisis, we're going to have to take controls of the economy and individuals and so forth. I don't know. It's a strange non-response, a strange way of handling it. And I think that if it does go forward and we do not control it, that there may be an overreaction where the government starts taking away the rights of those that aren't that necessarily involved or need that to happen. I hope that's not the case. But as you know, this current government uses crisis to advance their philosophy and their agenda.
Well, you just verbalized what a lot of our radio listeners are expressing to me in recent days. They're concerned that this is being allowed to deliberately fester until there is genuine panic in the American people and a demand from the public, do something, just do something. And then they step in with the hard, heavy-handed emergency measures, and they just keep stoking the fears and just driving the fear level until the people are demanding a powerful response from Washington. And, Congressman, I've said this, I was talking about this 14, 15 years ago. If there was ever a plague, it would be the perfect cover to destroy the constitutional republic, to destroy paper money. You'd have to gather up money because it's being used to circulate viruses. And so there's a lot that could be done with this particular virus, and I think all of us should be on guard for the worst-case scenario to happen. My guest, Congressman Steve Stockman, Congressman of the 36th Congressional District, great state of Texas. Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate you being on True News.
Well, I really appreciate you taking my call, and as always, you do a service when you speak up and tell the truth, and knowledge is a great defense against authoritarianism. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, there is our closing music. This hour went by really fast. I appreciate you spending the hour with me.